All right, Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, coming your way on a Saturday night, striking up the live stream, as we love to do. If I could do this all the time, this is what I would do, is just talk college football live with you, because I get the instant interaction with everyone on the live chat, and so that's a good thing to do here. All right, subscribe, like, and comment. So even if you don't agree, so get a ton of comments, of course, with people that don't agree with me. And that's one of the reasons why we're here, is to discuss. Then it becomes a debate. I say that all the time: discussion, debate, analysis. So I give some analysis. I, of course, have contributors come on, and my guests give their analysis, their take, their perspective, and not everyone agrees, but that's a good thing. So we mix it up here at Mark Rogers TV. So please comment. And even if you don't like me or the channel, I would say still subscribe, because if you love college football, this is the place to be. Who else brings you the consistent analysis that we do here, again, from myself, and then also tons of bloggers and broadcasters all over the place? Just let's say in the last week to 2 weeks, we have been all over the place. We've had on Ohio State, Michigan talk, Nebraska, TCU, Oklahoma, Penn State, Clemson, Alabama, Miami, of course, LSU, Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, USC, UCLA, and on and on and on and on. And of course, love to hear from you as well. And included is not just talking about college football, but bring me your suggestions of what content you want to see, and then also what guests you would like me to have on. Mitch Light of Athlon Sports joined me yesterday. That was a great conversation. Please check it out. Mitch Light, he is of the Cover 2 podcast and Athlon Sports. He joined me to talk it up, as well as Matt Moscona from ESPN Radio, Baton Rouge, New Orleans, to break down those LSU Tigers. I don't know if there's a team in the nation that has a more polarizing spectrum of thought of where they're headed this year. A lot of people say it's LSU talent, and Coach O knows what he's doing, and he inspires these kids, and they'll be ready to go, and they will contend. And then others are looking at that schedule and thinking, whew, rookie quarterback, Coach O's not necessarily master tactician, and this thing is coming off the rails, and yeah, they've got talent, so they're going to win 5 games just in the dark. But this could be really ugly this year at LSU. All right, I'm going to strike up the live stream, and of course, also remind you of our contest that's being sponsored and supplied by Alonzo1219. So our thanks again go out to Alonzo1219 and his sponsorship and his generosity in this contest. So if you are subscribed to Alonzo1219 and you bring me more subscribers than anybody else, whoever brings me the most subscribers between now and July 15th, who is also subscribed to Alonzo1219, you win some really nice swag. And again, I keep saying I'm going to produce a video, but I will. I'll do a promo video, and I'll grab some screenshots online of Alonzo and some of the swag. Yeah, shirts and hats in particular, but also I think a lot of you would like, especially Miami fans, the turnover chain. He's got some of those that are beautiful. But also, if you love another team, if you're a fan of another team, that's fine. He has swag for all the other teams as well. Alonzo1219, thank you for sponsoring our first giveaway. So bring subscribers to Mark Rogers TV and win some swag from Alonzo1219. And let's see, coming up this week, before I get to the live chat, would like to let you know that most of the time I'm going to be working on getting us set for 2018 with previews and predictions and player rankings, like we started this week with the SEC, top 5 quarterbacks and running backs, the ACC, top 5 running backs. I released top 10 quarterbacks nationally. And so I may not have on a ton of guests. I'm going to be doing some research. And you guys can let me know if you would rather see guests talk about a particular team or subject, or just me knocking out lists. I can do that all day. Knockout lists: top 10 quarterbacks, top 10 defensive linemen, top 10 linebackers, top 5 in the ACC, top 5 in the SEC, on and on and on. I should probably rank the coaches too. I could rank the coaches as well. I've done that, but it's been a long time. Either last off season or the season before, uh, we ranked every Power 5 conference, the coaching staffs, or the coaches, the head coaches, all the way up to number 1. And we got to almost all the positions. And at this rate, I'm not going to get anywhere close to that this offseason for whatever reason, because I've only done the SEC quarterbacks and running backs and the ACC running backs. And that's all I've gotten done. But in past off seasons, I've gotten to almost everything. Pac-12 safeties. But not quite as successful doing all of that this time around. And I would still want to rank the schedules. I have to rank the schedules. That's one of my favorite things to do. So on Wednesday night, we do have a power-packed lineup on Wednesday night. 7 o'clock, Ohio State fans, listen up. 7 o'clock, I'm not just having one guest on. I'm having 3 excellent guests on. Claire Crawford, Steve Hellwagon, Tony Gerdeman from the Ozone, from 24/7 Sports, and also Claire Crawford and her podcast and her work that she's done with the Ozone as well. 3 Ohio State contributors, much like we did Thursday night with UCLA, just digging deep into Ohio State football. That's 7 o'clock Eastern time, Wednesday night. At 8:30, Dwayne Holloway's joining me to talk Miami. Dwayne making his first appearance on Mark Rogers TV. This will be Wednesday night at 8:30 Eastern time. And then at 10 o'clock, Kevin McGuffey and Mike Laval from Last Word on College Football join me to break down the top 5 in the SEC at wide receiver and tight end. And of course, throughout all of these, I will be taking your comments and questions on the live stream. And I got up this morning and I instantly jumped online to look over the comments that had come in, because I had seen, once it gets to like 10 comments, the little bell on Google just says 10 plus. And so I thought I need to start to respond to some of these, and there were just way too many. So I want you guys to realize that I try to get to as many comments as possible. And I used to, when I got like 3 comments a day, I got to all of them. But now that I'm getting 30 or 40 comments a day, it's kind of difficult to get to all of them. So if you don't want me spending all my time responding to comments and actually creating the content, that's what I need to do. So don't be offended if I don't respond to all of your comments. I try to mix it up and spread the wealth as well. So if I see that one of you has commented 5 times, well, I may not respond to all 5 comments. I may look at the most interesting comment that you made and respond to that one. So I can't get to all the comments, but I appreciate all of them. And as I've said in recent weeks, I'm trying to remind everybody more and more, because I'm hearing this on YouTube from big time YouTubers and people that make suggestions and make videos on how to build your YouTube channel, that you need to constantly pound home, subscribe and like and comment, because I never did that before. I just get on here and talk college football. But I'm going to try to sell a little bit better, so bear with me for those of you that are with me anyway and think, why does he keep saying to subscribe? I subscribed a year ago. So hang with me there. Let's strike up the live chat and see what you got. I didn't necessarily have one particular way I wanted to take the live stream tonight. Again, the last couple nights, I've thrown out 2 topics. One would be ranking your players within a particular conference, so your top 5, like we have here. So a number of you, including I think Bosch Gaming and Ryan, you guys more than anybody else have delivered your top 10 nationally and your top 5 at various positions within the Power 5 structure, and that's great. Also, what would you change in college football? And somebody jumped on that and provided some interesting changes to college football, whether that be to your team, you're a fan of this team and you wish that they would change. And we've done these videos in the past with the bloggers or the broadcasters we've had on, and we've gotten some interesting responses because some of them hate their coach. And so they say, well, fire the coach. That's what I want changed about this program. But others are more like, we really handle game day festivities really bad, and we need to do better at that. And then I've said, okay, what would you change about your conference? And most people point to scheduling. Some other people have pointed to other things I can't remember. And then what would you change about college football? So it's easy for me again. What would I change about college football? What do I talk about all the time? Scheduling and the playoff. And those are the things that I would change. And of course, I'm trying to get to the top 5. If I was doing this full time, if I was doing this all the time, you would have a top 5 list for every position in every conference, no doubt. And again, for whatever reason, I've focused on other things, but the previous couple off seasons, if you go back and do a search, let's say to 2014, 15, 16, and 17, you will see that I covered almost all the positions in the Power 5, but it's probably going to be tough to make that happen this time around, considering it's late June. We've got SEC Media Days coming up in like 3 weeks. So once the Media Days kicks in, I will be all over it. I will watch the news conferences. I will respond. I will give you my take. Some of them, of course, happen on the same day, so it's difficult to cover all of them. The SEC is preeminent there. They host the biggest media days. That doesn't mean they're the most important conference, but they do it upright. I'll let you know and maybe tell some stories of when I covered SEC Media Days. So this is 1994 through 2000, and it was a big deal then. But with digital media, with the internet, it's become massive. I don't even remember what the media count was for last year. It was something like 900 or 1,000 media at SEC Media Days. We would typically have, what they would do is, as you well know, they split the players. Each team brings the head coach and 2 players. And it might be up to 3 players now, but they bring, back in the late 90s, they brought 2 players. And they would bring them through. And the coaches would speak at the podium as they do now. They would also go to various conference rooms. So they may have a long hall. And as you see on the SEC network and ESPN now, you see just Radio Row, as they call it, with all the radio stations from around, in this case, the SEC. And I think the other conferences are trying to model themselves and get to that point. But you see a long row of just radio guys talking to players and grabbing coaches and really grabbing other radio guys to talk football. And then they have a schedule in which they'll bring in a particular coach at a particular time. And now it's blown up to the point where the coach is on the podium and everybody's in the audience. And then you catch the coach on the side and try to interview him one-on-one, or it's usually about 12-on-1. And then the players come in as well, and you catch them in the particular setting. But you've got a time in which that you could, back in the day, I'd interview Steve Spurrier at this time, and then Les Miles at this time, and then on and on and on. And it was a fun deal. And I still have a vivid memory of one of the nicest acts by a particular coach was Tommy Tuberville, who had just received the job at Ole Miss. And I was doing my 6 o'clock live shot for the local news, and to talk about the first day of media days. And at the same time, there was a big banquet going on with all the coaches and players, and it was like 10 blocks away. And I had requested Tommy Tuberville to show up during the 6 o'clock news so I could interview him. And we thought we kind of lost him because nobody's going to come all the way back 10 blocks from being in the middle of a banquet and cocktail hour and all that to come back to do a 3 or 5 minute interview. But Tommy Tuberville showed up. I didn't know what I was going to talk about. I didn't have enough filler to fill the time. And then Tommy Tuberville showed up, and I was truly indebted to him. And to the point where he follows me on Twitter. I follow him, and we've had a great working relationship ever since. Of course, he has gone on to coach, that was Ole Miss. Then he went to Auburn, covered that story of Tommy Tuberville being ushered off to Auburn, and then later to Cincinnati and Texas Tech. I ran into him a couple years ago. It was funny, in the bathroom at the American Conference Media Days. This was about 3 years ago. And I hadn't talked to him in a long time, or seen him in a long time. And so I thought, I didn't know if he would recognize me. And actually, that was like in a conference room. And anyway, he picked me out. He was being interviewed by a few other guys, the radio guys and newspaper guys. And I was kind of just standing back waiting for them to be done so I could interview him. And again, I wasn't going to assume that he remembered me. So I kind of stood back, and he kind of stopped his interview with these radio guys. And he goes, "Hey, Mark, how's it going? I'll get to you in just a second." So then it was funny because I was driving home then, after interviewing the coaches and players, and I saw that Tommy Tuberville followed me on Twitter. So I, of course, followed him right back. All right, let's get to the live chat. Sorry, there's been about 55 zillion comments that have gone by, and I have not seen them. And I want to take them from the top because typically I take them from the other way, and some of them don't make sense. All right, we're back to this LSU-Miami game. You guys cannot, I don't know what you guys will do when there's not a Miami-LSU game to talk about. I am probably going to have my most comments when I finally make a prediction on LSU and Miami. You guys are going to be all over me. So George chimes in with LSU winning 27-14. Gators over Miami, making his prediction about a year and a half before the Miami-Florida game, 34-31. George, I have a hard time respecting people that lose to North Carolina, Pitt, Georgia Tech, whatever you know what I mean. Miami go way back. So Miami's lost to, Pitt, North Carolina, Georgia Tech. Yes, they've lost to all those teams at some point. But then again, I think Florida State's probably lost to all those teams at some point. I know they've lost to North Carolina and Georgia Tech just in the last 3 or 4 years. George with some comments. Tim jumps in with, why are Miami fans love starved? Because Miami has so much talent but didn't produce. CFLSN. I like MRSN weekly live broadcast only on YouTube. MR Mark Rogers Sports. What are we going for then? SN. Saturday night, I guess. Mr. 12 jumping in there. Cash Boy D, Roll Tide. Cash Boy D, hopefully you catch our Alabama content with Stephen M. Smith of Touchdown Alabama. I've had on Gary Harris from WVUA in Tuscaloosa as well a few times, and Gary's a good guy to jump on with us. He's one of the sports directors in town there in Tuscaloosa. Again, I'm always asking you guys if there are other media people out there that you would like to see, just to give another, not that we're going to kick off the current people that we have on, but just to get a different perspective, to not always get the same perspective on whatever team, but to get different people jumping in. So for example, Miami, I know there's a ton of you that love Miami. So I've always gone to Cam Underwood. He does a great job, but he's not always available. Plus there's just other perspective out there. So I found Alonzo1219, and I found Jordan Cooper, who joined us once, and hopefully he'll come back. He says he wants to come back. And I talked to a couple of the staffers there on campus, Isaiah Kim Martinez and Eric Marrero, who's been on recently, but he's focusing more on Florida football, I guess, now. Martin, that Germany-Sweden game, I got to stop right there. World Cup talk not allowed. Ryan, yeah. Cash Boy D, top wide receivers. Yes, we'll get there. We got the top 10 nationally at quarterback. I've got my notes on running back. I think I've got the 10 that I want, and then I'll move on to wide receivers. I hate to do this to the line play. If I don't get to everyone, I want to make sure I get quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers. You guys can agree and understand the business decision I'm making there, that most people are searching quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers. But I want to cover everyone, and that's the attempt. So I will do top 10 offensive linemen, and that's not even fair to the offensive linemen, because if you think about it, there's only one quarterback on the field. There's 5 offensive linemen, and they actually play 3 different positions, but everyone just rates the top 10 offensive linemen: center, guard, tackle. It's really unfair, because if you're the 10th best offensive lineman in America, you're way better than that 10th best quarterback, because you've got 68 Power 5 teams. You've got 130 FBS teams. So, and a lot of guys shuffle in and out. Most teams play about 7 offensive linemen, but let's even take the starting 5. 5 times 130, that's 650 offensive linemen that are starters in FBS, and only 130 quarterbacks, but we rate the top 10. So that number 10 offensive lineman, he is elite. All right, Mitch is a really good analyst. Glad y'all partnered. Well, I don't know that we partnered. He runs Athlons. He's the managing editor there, and also has his podcast covered too. But he did say at the end of the deal, I don't know if this was still on air or after we stopped recording, that he said, "Hey, anytime." I also had Phil Steele tell me that one time, and Phil Steele is a great guy, and he came on about 2 years ago, and we had a great conversation. But unfortunately, Phil Steele then signed a contract with ESPN, and therefore he is not allowed to come on any other outlets unless it's approved. You would think, based on my employer, that I would be able to make that happen. And maybe I could, but it just seems like a lot of work to try to figure out who I need to talk to there to make that happen. But I ran into Phil Steele at the cafeteria about 6 weeks ago. I went up and talked to him, and then asked if he'd come back on, and he gave me his contract situation and said, if you can get that approved, then I'd be happy to come on. And I was like, who do I talk to? All right, go Irish. Johnny Bays. Johnny, we will attempt to get you some Notre Dame coverage as well. And again, as I mentioned to you guys sometime in the last few days, I'll probably do less team reports, because they just don't seem to resonate with you guys. I love them. I love to have the TCU guy come on, like I did Monday from Rivals, so I can get caught up personally on TCU football, and I walk away from that conversation thinking, okay, I got a handle on TCU. I know about 5 players on TCU just all the time. But I talk to a guy like that, and this is before I prep. If I prep TCU, then I know the team before week 1. But right now, I'm just talking about in the middle of February, after they lose some guys to the NFL. I just know the main impact players. But then I talk to a guy like Billy Wessels from Rivals on Monday. Check out that video, TCU. He was really good. We talked about the grudge that TCU has against Ohio State. That was interesting. But we talk, the TCU Rivals guy and myself, and then I come away with that conversation and think, man, this is great for junkies of college football, because now I am prepped on TCU. We talked about every angle of the team, and I'm good to go. But those videos don't really rate. The ones that rate are top 10 quarterbacks, top 10 non-conference games, those kind of things that are clickbait that people love to see. What do you get hung up on online? I know that I get suckered in to those stupid pictures of "you'll never believe this" or top 10 this or top 10 that, because I think, oh, let's see what their top 10 list is. Even if it's not sports related, I'm probably going to disagree with it. So I get suckered in, and then it's a really stupid, mindless stream of crap. LSU Superfan on Panther Pro 22. And I know if you guys don't have a chance to do this, it's fine, but I would be interested. I asked this the other night, if you guys would, not necessarily on the live chat, because once the live chat's gone, it's gone. Although I can rewatch the video and go through the live chat and slide the time bar and see the time chat, the live chat. But if you want to comment to me, I'm just interested when I see a lot of names here, and I don't know if you guys have been watching me for 3 weeks or 3 months or 3 years. LSU going 8-4 according to Panther Pro 22, and that would be a nice finish. And if LSU is 8-4 against that schedule, they will have probably proved to be one of the 15 best teams in the country against that schedule. So that's most likely they lose at home to Georgia, they lose to Alabama, they lose to Miami most likely, and they lose to maybe Mississippi State. Those are probably the losses, or Florida. And that means they will have beaten Ole Miss, and they will have beaten either Florida or Mississippi State. They will have beaten Texas A&M. Fill in after Michigan, Miami, and Auburn lose in week 1. How do you see the top 5? Well, I got to actually see these teams lose first. And then after those 3 teams lose, fill in, think about it. Those 3 teams are not going to be in the top 5 anyway. You guys, if you weren't with me last football season, you're going to love my Sunday ritual of tearing the top 25 to shreds. So I wait until the top 25 is released, and then I look at it, and I'm like, okay, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. And I go by resume, and I cut a video, or this is the way I approached it last year. I cut a video and tell you this is what is not consistent. So, for example, after Michigan State beat Michigan last year, they were still ranked behind Michigan, and they had the same record. You know, they were both 6-1, let's say, and Michigan State won the game in Ann Arbor head to head, and they were still ranked behind Michigan. It didn't make any sense. I point out those inconsistencies. And you can't do the head-to-head the entire season. I understand that. And I don't take that to an extreme. If one team's 5-4 and they beat an 8-1 team just because they beat them head-to-head doesn't mean they should be ranked ahead of them. But if they have the same record, they should be. But then again, you get into the Stanford beat USC and USC beat UCLA, but UCLA beat Stanford. And but some of them are so obviously inconsistent and make no sense. It drives me nuts. So I do that video to point out the inconsistencies and the illogic, and then I knock out my own top 25. And beware, in the first few weeks, my top 25 is going to be nuts, usually. So, for example, week 1, Maryland beat Texas. I had Maryland ranked like 13th in the country. And of course, people jumped all over me. And I clearly explained, I don't think Maryland is the 13th best team in the country, but they haven't lost. I think they won their next game against somebody bad. They were 2-0, and they beat Texas. And Texas then the week after proved in going to, I think this was 2 weeks later after they dusted San Jose State like 56-0. Then they went to USC and lost that double overtime game. I'm like, well, Maryland's 2-0. They beat Texas, who lost in double overtime to USC. So, no, I don't think Maryland is the 13th best team in the country, but I'm just going by their resume right now, and it says 2-0 with a win over Texas. And some people finally got it. And I clearly said, Maryland will most likely prove not to be the 13th best team in the country. Therefore, when they lose a game and then lose another, they'll be out. But until that happens, and of course, the resume is you have to make some assumptions for the first couple of weeks because you only have 1 or 2 games on the record. So if Ohio State beats Oregon State in week 1, and there's a ton of other teams that have better wins, I'm still going to rate Ohio State below those teams. If Virginia Tech goes out and beats Florida State in week 1, and Ohio State does what they're supposed to do and beats Oregon State, who's probably going to be awful again, I will rank Virginia Tech ahead of Ohio State. And then most likely Virginia Tech's going to lose their couple games, 3 or 4, and then they'll be gone down the list. And Ohio State most likely is only going to lose 1 game, and they'll rise. But for that 1 week, if Virginia Tech would go to Tallahassee and win, I'm going to vault them because that's their resume at that point. All right. Leon Hurricanes, another faithful viewer. Well, Ed, not winning nothing the first week. That's a promise. And it's more LSU-Miami talk. Bosch Gaming, top 5 defenses. Here's another one I could go after, huh? I could do this video. Let's see if I agree off the top of my head. Clemson, Ohio State, Georgia, Utah, Wisconsin. I like the first 3. I don't know that Utah is going to be quite that good on defense, but I need to start really dissecting some of these teams. So I think I'd let you guys know that the other night I really dissected, for whatever reason, Kansas and Kansas State. I really looked at the personnel, looked at the metrics, so I could walk away from that, studying it, being like, okay, I know Kansas and Kansas State. Now I'm going to move on to somebody else. And then I started to look at Iowa State. I looked at some other group of 5 teams too. So I got to get familiar with Utah. I know Zach Moss at running back. I know Huntley, the quarterback, but the Utah personnel on defense, I've got to get acquainted. But based on reputation, yeah, Utah typically has a top 20 defense, not top 4 in the country. Wisconsin lost a lot on defense. So I know that they're going to be good on defense. They always are, but top 5 good. So I'm not disputing that top 5, but I'm just saying I'm sold on 3, but the other 2, until I look it over, I'm going to consider the likes of Alabama, Michigan, Miami. I think those 3 defenses, off the top of my head, again, I haven't studied it yet, but Alabama, Michigan, and Miami are better than Utah and Wisconsin defensively. No one here needs pretty giveaways, and so gimmicky. Sorry to be saying it. LSU, you need to beat Florida to get a bowl win or a bowl game. I'm all about the rankings. Rank everything. Rank everything. Rank everything. Boss Gaming playoff picks: Georgia, Ohio State, Utah, West Virginia. Then just on the outside, Alabama, Washington, Iowa, Penn State. Okay. So let's think about this, Bosch Gaming. Utah has obviously won the Pac-12 with only 1 loss to get into the college football playoff. West Virginia has definitely only lost 1 game and won the Big 12. So West Virginia, they've got NC State and Tennessee non-conference. I know Tennessee's rubbish, but it's still Tennessee has pretty good talent. They're not going to be that awful. So West Virginia's got to get by Tennessee and NC State on the road, and they've got to win the Big 12. Oklahoma State, Kansas State, Texas, and win a rematch against one of those teams. Utah has, of course, USC, UCLA, Arizona State in their division. I haven't looked at their Pac-12 North schedule. I think they have, think about this, Bosch Gaming, I believe they have the toughest North Division slate, meaning Stanford, Washington State included. So that should be tough. Utah doesn't play anyone out of conference. BYU, I think that's it. They don't have a tough non-conference game. So Georgia and Ohio State, because of reputation, because of talent, because of the SEC and the Big Ten, and especially Georgia, put them in this class. They've got a little wiggle room. Ohio State, basically, their formula is beat TCU and win all the games except for 1 in the Big Ten, go 11-1, win the Big Ten championship game. Maybe even lose. Is a 2-loss team going to make it this year? I'll have to think about that, but I would lean yes. West Virginia, yeah, Georgia. So this is telling me as well, Bosch Gaming, is that Alabama lost the SEC championship game to Georgia, and they probably lost another game. Because if they go to Atlanta the first week of December with no losses and lose to Georgia in the SEC title game, they're still going to the playoff. So they've lost to somebody else. And who are they going to lose to? Auburn at home? I guess it would have to be, who is Alabama going to lose to? The two teams that really tested them last year, Auburn beat them. Mississippi State took them to the wire, had them at home. And this time, Mississippi State and Auburn both have to go to Tuscaloosa. That's the tough deal there. All right. Have we talked about the LSU smackdown of Miami yet? I don't know that anybody's mentioned that game in a few months. Claire needs to come up with something new. I meant Claire. She needs to come up with something new. I'll have to pass that along to her. I don't know what that means, Tim. Tim, good to see you on the line. Fill in. Good to see you. LSU, Notre Dame, and Washington will win. LSU, Notre Dame over Michigan, Washington. So if you saw my video of the top 10 non-conference games, I also gave kind of a summer edge. It wasn't a prediction, but a summer edge. And I gave it to Miami by a touchdown, Michigan by 4, and Washington by 6. Have we talked about Bama's winning streak on LSU? Yeah, it's been pretty ugly. So it started with the 2011 BCS championship game in New Orleans, 21-0. Jordan Jefferson at quarterback for LSU. And ever since then, Bama has really only one game that I can think of. It was the Zach Mettenberger, Jarvis Landry, Odell Beckham Jr. game in Tuscaloosa about 4 years ago. That was the 2013 game. It was like 35-17. That it wasn't a blowout, but Bama took charge. And then the one game, Leonard Fournette could only gain like 11 yards, and Bama won 28-10. That game they had in hand. The LSU, make fun of LSU, but they have to play Bama every year, and they play them better than anybody consistently. Now, Mississippi State had their one shot last year, but Mississippi State gets trounced by Bama most of the time. But if you check the scores and if you watch the games, which I always watch Bama LSU, one of those games, A.J. McCarron swung that pass to T.J. Yeldon for a touchdown late in the game. LSU should have won that game. They did some stupid Les Miles kind of stuff late in the game. There was another game that went to overtime that LSU should have won. Again, they had it late in the game. They led by a touchdown, let Bama score. They did something. They coughed up the ball. Then they lost in overtime. They had the game 2 years ago in Baton Rouge where it was the game of the season that went scoreless for the longest period of time. It was still scoreless with 10 minutes left. That's how good LSU's defense was. They finally gave up a touchdown to Jalen Hurts on a long run, about a 30-yard run, and it was 10-0. So LSU has played Alabama really close, but that doesn't count. They lose all the games. So that's 2012 through 17. That's 6 games plus the championship game. That's 7 consecutive Bama wins. I was for Miami, but their cockiness made me become a realist. All right, Panther Pro 22. Top 4 defenses: Ohio State, Clemson, Bama, Michigan. I think these will be the 4 elite defenses this year. All right, Panther Pro 22, thinking along the lines where I am. I think those were the top 2 teams that I mentioned outside of Bosch Gaming's top 4 defenses. Bama, Michigan. Also, I threw somebody else out there that I like. Miami. Miami could never be LSU. LSU is the 3rd most talented team in the SEC this year behind Georgia and Bama. Well, they probably are. They are. Maybe Auburn. All you have to do is look at recruiting rankings, and nobody else comes close to those 3 to 4 teams, although Florida's right there as well. Ryan telling Bosch Gaming to pump the brakes on Utah. Yeah, they're going to be a good team. 9-3 is a reasonable goal, but they are not a playoff team. Yeah, they probably aren't. And the schedule doesn't help them. It helps them out of conference. They don't have to deal with a big team out of conference, and the division's weak. You got to think the Pac 12 South is the weakest division in football. I think it's weaker than the Big Ten West. Wisconsin, Iowa, Northwestern's good, but the Pac 12 South, yeah, USC is very talented, but they could be off their game this year. UCLA, Arizona, Arizona State, Utah. It's not a bad division in that there aren't horrible teams in it, but they're all decent. USC is a top 20-25 team. Utah's a top 20-25 team. UCLA, Arizona, Arizona State more in the top 40 to 45 range, and then Colorado's off the map. So yeah, but Purdue's pretty good. Big Ten West, Pac-12 South. I'm going to say that the Pac-12 South is the weakest division. So Utah's got that going for them. But again, I think that they play, and you can check this out, Bosch Gaming, that they have to play Stanford and Washington out of the Pac-12 North. Panther overrate. Ohio State, Michigan is good there. Not sure about the others. Just don't see Michigan, Ohio State making it, especially with West Virginia having the most complete team. Bosch Gaming, are you telling us that West Virginia is better than Ohio State and Michigan? Fill in Michigan, definitely beating Notre Dame. I feel really confident about that. I would favor Auburn and Miami, but I'm not confident about those. NCIS Fanatic 21 chiming in. If I were to change something from the 2017 season, I would have changed quarterbacks. I know you love Dwayne Haskins. I would change Rutgers and Maryland. Pac-12 has the best system. 12 teams in the conference, 9 conference games is ideal. Do it, Big Ten, drop Rutgers and Maryland. Bosch Gaming, I went on a mini rampage when Rutgers and Maryland joined the Big Ten. I said, okay, football is suffering here with this decision. That's obvious. That's been played out. We've seen it. Maryland made one lousy bowl game. Rutgers made one lousy bowl game, but like the lowest tier of bowl games. And they've been just awful at times. There was a season, what was that, 2 years ago, where Rutgers did not score a point against Ohio State, Michigan, Michigan State, and Penn State. All 4 of them shut them out. It was like 240 to nothing. So where I think the Big Ten missed it is they, of course, can look at the records and even the potential of those 2 programs. What they're going to be long term is Rutgers is going to win 4 or 5 games every year. Every so often, they're going to win 6 or 7 and get to a bowl game because they've got a lousy non-conference slate. And Maryland's going to be a slightly better. Maryland's got a chance. DJ Durkin seems to know what he's doing. He's recruiting well. They're in a place, well, both of them are in decent recruiting geographies. New Jersey, Maryland with Virginia, Pennsylvania, right there. They both have decent recruiting footprints, better than Iowa or Nebraska, Minnesota. But this is just going to be rough watching Rutgers and Maryland, and has been. So the Big Ten, the reason why they added those 2 schools was for the eyeballs in the Beltway: Baltimore, Washington, D.C., New York City. And we all know that nobody really cares about those schools in those 3 markets. They care about professional sports. And if anyone cares about college football in New York City, they are rooting for Michigan or Notre Dame or Penn State, not Rutgers. Michigan going to get a beating. Utah, Arizona, West Virginia, Purdue, Maryland are all teams that I think are good, but they aren't true contenders, more because of depth rather than talent. William Lee, let's talk about Georgia losing another top 15 in state recruit today. Well, let us know about that. So as you can tell on here, I'm not huge on recruiting, although I have reached out to some 300 ESPN 300 commits, and I've got a number of them lined up for interviews. I talked with one of them, and we cut the interview yesterday. The 35th rated cornerback, according to 247 Sports, out of Florida, going to Florida State. So if you look back at old videos, I used to interview a lot of recruits, but that's just kind of a big run around trying to chase those kids down. So I would still like to do it because people love recruiting. And I did it this past signing period. I don't know how many of you were around a few months ago, but prior to the second National Signing Day in February, I started to do thumbnails on the top players in the country. I went down a list on either 247 or Rivals and just would say, okay, boom, this kid is number one at quarterback. And I did some research on him, cut a video, and people loved it. Bosch Gaming, in terms of playoff picks, I really don't see Utah or West Virginia getting in over Bama or Clemson. What else? Anything else? Pigskin Pete. Hello, Mark. Pigskin Pete and I tried to cut a segment a few weeks ago, and we had some technical difficulties. What do you say, Pigskin Pete? We'll give it another shot and talk some Clemson football. All right. Anything else? Anything else? Machine Unit. Hey, Mark, love your channel, dude. Oh, I just lost it. It just jumped on me. West Virginia, the best team in the Big 12, according to Bosch Gaming. West Virginia can't play defense. The real Death Valley. I'll let you guys argue that. Joe Burrow could have a chance. That's going to be fascinating to see how well Joe Burrow, who most likely will beat out Miles Brennan. It's not a done deal, but you don't bring in a transfer from a place like Ohio State for the kid to sit. But it's not a done deal. And based on our conversation the other day with Matt Moscona from ESPN Radio, Burrow is more college ready physically than Miles Brennan. Remember when Michigan beat Rutgers 78-0? If you guys are nerds, like geek stat guys, go back, just look up the Michigan Rutgers box score from that game, 78-0. Rutgers had, I don't think they got a first down until there were 5 minutes left in the game. They had like 22 yards total offense. It was one of the ugliest box scores you'll ever see. Pigskin Pete, Dennis Wilson, Miami Dolphins Stadium is Death Valley. Panther Pro 22, Miami beats LSU 27-23. Auburn over Washington 31-24. Michigan beats Notre Dame 33-20 at South Bend. Ricky chiming in with Michigan over Rutgers 78-0 in 16. Yes. Only reason why Rutgers is in the Big Ten is because of the New York market. Of course, yes, the basketball school. Maryland's a basketball school to a certain extent. I remember a long time ago, Leon Hurricanes. I was like, there's another Death Valley. I'm from Baton Rouge. I thought LSU was the only Death Valley. So this is going way back, but LSU, Ohio State, 1987, Buckeyes playing in Death Valley. And a reporter asked Chris Spielman about playing in Death Valley, playing at Tiger Stadium. And he said, Tiger Stadium, the only Tiger Stadium I know of is in Massillon. Massillon Tigers, it's a big high school football tradition there in Ohio. Ricky, Iowa beat Michigan the same year, just saying. Mark, why is it that the normal guy can figure this out, but the professionals who are getting paid just don't seem to understand that Maryland and Rutgers are just not really Big Ten? Well, that's not necessarily, the professionals, meaning the Big Ten Conference. Well, I don't know what it's cost them financially. So let's understand that finances rule everything. So the Big Ten, in making these determinations over who they are going to add, and that was, of course, Penn State back in 1993. It was Nebraska in 2012, and then it was Rutgers, Maryland a couple of years later. They're looking at three things: money, money, probably money, two of the three, but we'll go with money, academic fit. So there were some schools like a Louisville, like a West Virginia, that in terms of football play and geography makes sense to join the Big Ten. Missouri would be another one, but academically, I can't think of somebody out there. You guys will know. Somebody will know what the academic uh, credential is that the Big Ten, all Big Ten schools must have this certain certification academically. And Missouri did not. Louisville, West Virginia do not. And therefore, Rutgers met that standard, Maryland and Nebraska. So the academics actually do mean something in the Big Ten. And not saying that they don't in the other Power Five, but the Big Ten has been very upfront about the academic fit mattering. It matters. And the third one, money, academics, and football. And of course, football didn't weigh into the decision. It weighed into it heavily with Nebraska because at that time, especially, the SEC was just owning the sport. And the Big Ten was sick of getting pounded on the field and hearing about it. And they added Nebraska thinking, and at that time, you've got to realize, even though Nebraska was not 1990s Nebraska, they were coming off playing in multiple Big 12 championship games. They lost them all, but they lost them respectively, in respectable fashion, I should say. The Colt McCoy play in 2009, where he threw the ball out of bounds with 1 second left, or Nebraska fans would tell you with no time left, and Nebraska should have won the Big 12 championship, and that allowed Texas to move on to the national championship game against Alabama. But Nebraska just came off a few seasons where they took Oklahoma and Texas, two top 5 teams, to the wire in the Big 12 championship game. So the Big Ten thought it was getting that Nebraska on the field. Yeah, the Rutgers, Maryland decision was all about cable subscriptions and rear ends in the seats. And more than that, again, eyeballs plastered against laptop screens or phones, or at the time they were thinking more television, but the world has changed drastically. Oh man, I lost my place. We got here. I'm all over the place. I'm way behind here. Let's see if I can catch back up. Too bad 28. West Virginia gets TCU and Oklahoma at home. That could help them, but OU hasn't lost to West Virginia since they joined the conference. Yeah, Donovan, thanks for joining the live chat tonight. Yeah, LSU has been on a roll. I hope you caught our conversation with Matt Moscona the other day. We talked about the Stingley commitment, of course, highlighting what's been done since April 1st. It's been big for LSU. Gators win 41-38, according to George. I'm an Orange Bowl guy, but I last checked, Hard Rock Stadium is an NFL stadium. Great recruiting weekend for LSU. There's no way Florida putting those points on the board on our defense. Dennis, you got to love Dennis, because regardless of what happened last year, regardless of what recent history tells us about Miami against the big teams, he will just still trash talk and throw it in your face. This guy, just a few months after 38-3, is saying Death Valley will soon be Soft Valley. Dennis, you might have been able to come up with a better name than Soft Valley. Not really catching that, but that's fine. Al Johnson, haven't seen your name before. Welcome to the channel. What's going on? Kane's defense is going to be better than people think. I believe we're going to shut people down. Well, I don't think anyone's questioning Miami's defense. You lost. I think the big loss is going to be R.J. McIntosh. That guy, every time I turned on the TV to watch Miami football, and I watched the big games, Florida State, Virginia Tech, Notre Dame, the bowl game, the ACC championship game for as long as it was competitive for about 13 minutes. I watched it. And then, of course, the Pitt game. Yeah, R.J. McIntosh he should have been a first-team All-American. I cannot imagine another defensive lineman who was as dominant, maybe not play to play, but in terms of making disruptive plays in the opponent's backfield. They're going to miss him. But otherwise, those three studs back at linebacker, the secondary still stout. So I don't know, Al, that anybody's questioning Miami's defense. I think they're questioning the quarterback and the depth being as great as it needs to be to take on Clemson. All right. Panther Pro 22. Overrated teams. West Virginia. I would agree. Notre Dame, Michigan State, TCU, Virginia Tech, South Carolina. Don't know that anyone's overrating Virginia Tech. They're going to go 8-4, right, Panther Pro? 8-4, Virginia Tech. The Canes were going to get wiped out by Pitt, Notre Dame, Clemson, LSU. Miami shut down Clemson. Please, something. I agree Michigan State is overrated. All right. Michigan beats Notre Dame 24-10. Our defense is too strong and our offense definitely won't be fully clicking just yet. Yes, NCIS Fanatic 21, that 1987 game, LSU was lining up for the game-winning field goal. Ohio State blocked it 13-13. And then, as we've discussed before, the Bayou Bengals came to Columbus the next year in 1988. John Cooper's second game led 33-20, mid-fourth quarter. Greg Fry and the Buckeyes came back. Bobby Olive caught the game-winning touchdown. Buckeyes won at 36-33, and then proceeded to have a horrible season. All right, what else do we have? George is off the rail here. 24-20-24. Jinker GM not following Michigan Notre Dame. You've got a score there. It's backwards. I don't know. All right, Dexter Williams. More likely to get into the playoffs, Georgia or Oklahoma? That's an interesting one. My spirit all under Hard Rock Stadium soil. Dennis, man, you just... Dennis, you love your Canes. I don't know where you are most of the time with these comments, but that's fine. Mark's only acting like a Buckeye sometime because he likes those female commentators from Ohio. Mark just committed a party foul. He lost his place. Yeah, you can't do that. Mississippi State. Yeah, big Mississippi State guy I am. You found me out. All right, I think I've caught up with a chat. Look at that. Legend has it Mr. Mark Rogers is a Buckeye. And I think I could devote my channel to Miami and to LSU for the next 2 months before this game, and I would probably build it up fast. You guys are crazy. All right. Again, my top 10 non-conference games video is out. Please check it out. And I just cut a video running down the under-the-radar non-conference games, weeks 1, 2, 3, and 4. Top 10 quarterbacks. That's out. Top 5 in the SEC, quarterbacks, running backs. Top 5 in the ACC, running backs. TCU, Nebraska, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Alabama, LSU. We've talked all those teams in recent days. UCLA. Do you guys have any thoughts about this? So last Thursday night, just 2 nights ago, I brought on 2 UCLA guys, Tony Siracusa and Mike Regalado. And Danielle Alvari was supposed to join us, but she had something else at the last minute. But the thought was just to go nuts on one team for 90 minutes or so. Just tear to shreds the program, top to bottom, the state of the program, the vibe, the environment, personnel breakdowns, uh, big picture, history, projecting forward, recruiting, all the big things. And we looked at Chip Kelly, of course, and his building of the UCLA program. And I thought it was a great conversation. I loved it. And I know UCLA doesn't get a ton of hits from me here, but we will continue to cover everybody. And if there's a team that I'm not covering, and let's take Wisconsin, for example. Wisconsin's probably the best team out there that I haven't really covered as well as I need to. It's been more me just referencing Wisconsin, but I haven't cut a specific Wisconsin video in a long time since the bowl game against Miami. But I just thought that was a great conversation. We're doing the same with Ohio State Wednesday night. Like to do the same with Miami and Clemson and Michigan and on and on and on and on. Everybody. I like to do that with Oregon State. Again, if I was doing this full time, I would do Oregon State. You would see Oregon State videos out of me. Kansas. So one guy will beat Ohio State. Dream on. Not trying to lose all my money. What are we getting at? Michigan sounds good. 90 minutes of Michigan. Mark Reed, I haven't seen your name before, so you must be a Michigan fan. Welcome to Mark Rogers TV. And if anybody on this chat has not subscribed yet, please do. I will not drive you crazy with notifications. I'm thinking that's the only reason why somebody who loves college football would not subscribe to this channel where we talk college football and do it well every day. Analysis from myself, great commentary from the audience here, from you guys, the community. And I bring on the best bloggers, broadcasters, and writers in the nation. Shoot, we had a guy from Athlons on the other day with a top-notch podcast, Jerry DiNardo from the Big Ten Network. I have kind of eased off on pursuing Peter Burns from the SEC Network. Do you guys know who Peter Burns is? Love to take a poll here with 37 people watching. How many people know who Peter Burns is? So Peter Burns is a friend, great guy, great host, and anchor there at ESPN and the SEC Network. But he has to have covered all the sports, of course. And Ryan knows him. So he used to be on quite a bit. He would come on just about every other Wednesday or Thursday night. And I can see that his workload is crazy during the end of basketball into the college regionals and the College World Series. But as soon as that's over, we'll have Peter back on. NCIS Fanatic 21, I have no clue who he is. So he's basically an SEC Network guy, but he has also appeared on ESPN for College Football Live. If you've seen that show, it's an afternoon show during the college football season. It'll probably start July 1st, I would guess, maybe August 1st. Alex Martin, I've seen that name. Alex, welcome to Mark Rogers TV. What are we going to do when this is live, Mark, and you have us on the phone and we all want to talk at the same time? So, yeah, I was looking into that today. So I contacted my man, Marty McPadden, about phone lines because I guess there's an app where you can spoof a phone call, meaning you've got a disguised phone number and then people call in and we can do it that way. The way I would have to do it right now would be for you to call and I'd have to hold the phone up to the mic. And I guess that's worked. You guys have probably seen guests where we had technical issues on the feed. And so what I had to do was I had to just say, you know what, give me a call. And I put the speaker from the phone up to the mic and we did it that way, old school, rudimentary. So I would have to do that right now, but I want to do it the right way. And of course, I see a lot of YouTube channels where they do live streams and they have a nice banner and they've got the phone number and everything like that. So for me to pursue all those production upgrades, the content's going to suffer, and I hate to do that, but this would be the time to do it in June. All right, after LSU hits Miami in the head, something. You guys are on it. Miami. Glenn Mason from the Big Ten Network. Okay. See if Glenn Mason wants to come on. Of course, former Kent State, Minnesota head coach, Kansas head coach. That was his last job. Glenn Mason was the head coach at Kent State when I was a student at Kent State. That was his last year at Kent State. So my first year at Kent State was Glenn Mason's last season at Kent State, I believe, and they went 7-4. And then Kent State won like 2 games the rest of my time there. And Glenn Mason went to Kansas. He did okay, got him the Minnesota job, and he did really well at Minnesota. You know, a lot of 7-5, 8-4 seasons. More Washington and Notre Dame coverage. Yeah, we used to have a Washington guy. Actually, I had 2 Washington guys, and I lost both of them. Aaron Seavercrop of the Dog Pound and Jack Fullman, great guy, but just too busy to do this, doing other stuff with his career. Used to have some great Washington content and just haven't recently, but I guess I'll have to grind away at Washington research and bring you some Washington content, fill in, and Notre Dame, of course. So we used to have a guy, and I've had so many people on, 107 just last year. So I probably had 300 people on total that I start to forget these guys' names, and I feel bad. But Kevin Sinclair, Notre Dame guy who went from the fan-sided Notre Dame site to Rivals. I think he works for Rivals now, and he's no longer allowed to come on. So I lost my Notre Dame guy that was just, this guy was tremendous. Kevin Sinclair. Still follow him on Twitter. He follows me. Great guy, but unfortunately couldn't continue the videos with me. And then I latched on to a couple of fan-sided guys, JP Scott, and I can't think of the other guy's name right off the top of my head, but I'll get back with them about Notre Dame football. Yeah, we want to hear more about Notre Dame because we love them. George. Miami's Texas A&M with a chain. I remember we beat him at Minnesota in 2005, 45-31. 2005, was it really that close? NCIS Fanatic 21, do you remember the Minnesota game in 1989? 31-0 Minnesota. Just before the half, Ohio State made one of the great comebacks in college football history, came back and won 41-37 at the Metrodome. Guys, remember the Metrodome? More LSU-Miami. I'll let you guys mix it up on that. The 50-yard line will still be perfect. Okay, Ricky, Mark, I saw an article that said Scott Frost is a better coach than Kirk Ferentz. Frost has 0 Big Ten wins. Ferentz has been coaching in the Big Ten for 20 years now. Well, of course, Scott Frost has 0 Big Ten wins, Ricky, because he has yet to coach a game in the Big Ten. Kirk Ferentz, it's kind of difficult to rate him now. He had a great reputation early in his career at Iowa because Hayden Fry built Iowa football back in the late 70s. And then they were good, really good throughout the 80s into the 90s. Then at the end of Hayden Fry's run, they declined. So the talent slide was on, and Kirk Ferentz reverse field, built the program back up, of course, built some of the tremendous offensive lines in college football. And really, Iowa's underrated, I think, in regards to what they've accomplished under Ferentz. Kirk Ferentz, difficult name to say sometimes. Sometimes you slide the syllable emphasis. Anyway, so Iowa's been good under him. He's won a Big Ten championship a few times. He played in an Orange Bowl against USC, got beat up in that game, but they won an Orange Bowl against Georgia Tech. He has played well in bowl games against the SEC. I know that recently Iowa lost 5 straight bowl games before winning this year against BC, but Kirk Ferentz has had a great run at Iowa. The thing that I can't quite determine is, and it's a guess, that Iowa should have difficulty winning because of where they're located. They're going to recruit linemen and linebackers generally, not that you don't get a decent possession receiver out of Iowa once in a while, but he has to coach them up. Iowa typically finishes 40th in the nation in recruiting, and he typically has a better than 40th best team in the nation. He's finished in the top 20 a bunch of times. Let's look at Kirk Ferentz and his I don't know why I can't say his name tonight. It's like one of those brain freezes, one of those. Let's look at his coaching record. I could probably remember this off the top of my head if I really tried. But let's take him year by year, and everybody else is probably shutting me off, but this is going to be a one-on-one between Ricky and I. The rest of you guys just chat amongst yourselves. So, yeah, this is what I'm talking about. When he took over Iowa, I remember this. They were awful. Hayden Fry had the great run, and then he just kind of mailed it in, and they were 1-10, 0-8 in the Big Ten in Ferentz's first season. And then improvement from 1-10 to 3-9, then 7-6, and they won the Alamo Bowl. And then he goes and finishes 11, and this is what gained his reputation. Takes over a team 1-10, and within 3 years, he goes to the Orange Bowl and ties for the Big Ten championship and finishes 8th in the country. That was the team that ran into Carson Palmer the year he won the Heisman Trophy, and they lost to a much more talented USC team, like 31-10 in the Orange Bowl. But then the next year, they go 10-3. They win the Outback Bowl over Florida, and he finishes 8th in the country again. Then the next year, they win the Capital One Bowl, if you remember that finish. Hail Mary in Nick Saban's last game at LSU, and they finished 10-2, 7-1, tied for first place in the Big Ten with Michigan. So in a 3-year span, he brings Iowa from 1-10 to 11-2, 10-3, 10-2, 8th, 8th, and 8th in the top 10, and ties for 2 Big Ten championships, and beats the likes of LSU and Florida in bowl games. But then he kind of slid into this 7-6, 6-7, 6-6, 9-4 mode. The 9-4 2008 team did just pummel South Carolina in the Outback Bowl and finished number 20. But the 3 consecutive years before that, after going number 8, 8-8 in the final poll, finished outside the top 25. Then he had a nice 2-year run where he won the Outback Bowl, finished number 20. Then they won the Orange Bowl over Georgia Tech, finished 11-2, almost upset Ohio State in Columbus, lost an overtime game that would have sent them to the Rose Bowl, and won the Big Ten championship, but Ohio State won the game. That's the year the Buckeyes beat Oregon in the Rose Bowl with Terrell Pryor at quarterback. But that Iowa team went to the Orange Bowl as an underdog against Georgia Tech, beat them, and finished number 7 in the country. But since then, 8-5, 7-6, 4-8, 8-5, 7-6, had the 12-2 year where they got slaughtered by Stanford in the Rose Bowl, still finished number 9 in the country after they lost the Big Ten championship game to Michigan State by about that much on the L.J. Scott play at the goal line. And then now the last 2 years, 8-5, 8-5, lost the Outback Bowl to Florida 2 years ago, beat Boston College this past year. So Kirk Ferentz takes over this awful program, goes from 1-10, and then makes them elite. Not quite elite. on that second tier, number 8 in the country 3 years in a row. Then he slides into this just barely over 500, has the one nice year winning the Orange Bowl, and then back into this slide for another 5 or 6 years of just a lot of 7 and 6s, 8 and 5s. Had the one decent year, really good season, started 12 and 0, didn't play anyone, but then lost to Michigan State and Stanford. And so there's the Kirk Ferentz. There's the resume right there. That's it. So we don't know what somebody else would do in Iowa. He's just been there for so long. He's been there for 19 years. What else would somebody do at Iowa if you took, and I'm not going to go to the extreme of Urban Meyer or Nick Saban, but take a good coach. Who's a good Mark Richt, David Shaw, Mark Richt, Dan Mullen. What would they do if they went to Iowa? How about doing top 10 teams with most or best rivalries? I'm not understanding what you're talking about. Top 10 teams with most or best rivalries? I can rank the top 10 rivalries if that's what you're talking about, fill in. Donovan Robinson, Peach Bowl. Where are we? I'm way behind. I promise you, Mark, if you approach Walmart about sponsoring this and providing the technology in return for a small logo, they will probably go for it. Let's do this. All right, George. I put up on Twitter today. I don't know how many of you guys are on Twitter, but please follow me there. I'll follow you back. So here's my deal on Twitter is that I don't follow anyone who doesn't follow me. I'm not the guy that follows Kirk Herbstreit and Chris Fowler and Vern Lundquist or whoever just because they're college football guys. Because if they're not going to follow me, I'm not going to follow them. And then anybody who follows me, if they've got a legitimate platform, media site, or they're a friend, if it's one of you guys, I'll follow you back if you're on Twitter. But the thing, George, here is who in the world do I approach at Walmart? It's not like I can just drive down the street and go to the local Walmart and say, hey, sponsor me. This is a whole corporate deal. This has to go through like 57 layers to get to someone who can make a decision. I love it, though. So what I was starting to say is I posted on Twitter and Facebook today that I'm looking for interns. I need help. And that intern can specialize in anything, or they can get their hands dirty in everything: social media, marketing, sales. They can come on camera if they've got aspirations of being on-air talent, and they make some sense and can present and communicate. I'll let them do videos. So if anybody out there knows of anyone who wants to do any of those things or all of those things, please let me know. Social media, marketing, sales, operational stuff, production stuff, or they want to present on air. They have to reach the Mark Rogers TV standards, though, if they want to present on air. I've given that up to a few times. There's actually, if you would dig back about 6 months, there's a video on here from a really great guy, college student, wanted to help me out, thought he could help me out in sales, and he cut a video. It's a bit rough. All right, back to the live chat. And if I missed anyone that had anything reasonable to say, I apologize. Fill in best rivalries. Okay, that's what I'm getting out of that comment. LSU missed out on at least 7 national championships. Really? Get Vern Lundquist on. I'll try. I would love to talk to Vern Lundquist. He's got nothing to do these days. He's retired. I wanted to play that song here called Tin Soldiers, but Mark's computer blocked me. What? Ohio post JT is going to be interesting. I see what you did there. Fill in. Mark, what are your top 5 defensive line units in college football? I really think Michigan is number 1. Do you think Clemson really is the best defensive line? Yes, I do. Clemson is 1. And don't hold me to this because you're just throwing this at me. So this is off the top of my head. I would rank it Clemson 1, Michigan 2, Ohio State 3, Alabama 4. Actually, Iowa has 3 tremendous defensive ends. I don't know if I'm going to put them 5th. TCU has a tremendous returning defensive line. Washington has a good defensive front. Texas, Georgia. But those 4, I'm going to stand with those 4. Clemson, Michigan, Ohio State, Alabama. Notre Dame best rivalries and most rivalries. USC, Stanford, Michigan, Navy. Miami struggled versus Georgia Tech, North Carolina. A terrible Florida State team was getting destroyed by Virginia in the first half and lost to Pitt. Nobody is scared of Miami. LSU superfan, I'll give you one more. Syracuse. Syracuse played within 1 score of Miami. That was a really good game. I watched more Miami football last year than I have in a long time. I saw the Virginia game, the Syracuse game, the North Carolina, Duke, Virginia Tech, Notre Dame, Wisconsin, Pitt, Clemson. Well, Clemson, I didn't see. That's the night that all the conference championship games are being played. So I'm sure I watched the Big Ten and didn't watch that Clemson-Miami debacle. Then, of course, I saw the Wisconsin Orange Bowl game. Rumor has it Nebraska considered leaving the Big Ten a couple years ago. Pitt, Purdue. I want to see that Miami defensive line on opening day against LSU. Mr. 12, Nick Bosa, Chase Young, Draymond Jones, plus everyone else is way better than Rashawn Gary, Chase Winovich, and maybe Aubrey Solomon. I got you, Mr. 12. I hear you. That was off the top of my head. Rashawn Gary, though, monster. Nebraska should just join the SEC, and then they would be in the big leagues and dilute the SEC and make it easier for everybody else. Mr. Mark Rogers, I will hold you to that because Miami #1 defensive front line. Didn't they just join the Big Ten a couple of years ago? Florida 28, Georgia 24. Do you think we're all giving Georgia a little bit too much credit? And I'm guilty of this too. If you're going to ask me what team is definitely going to win a division, Clemson comes to mind first, then Georgia. And maybe even Georgia over Clemson because Florida State, Louisville, NC State. Georgia seems to be the team that is most locked into the conference championship game. They lost a lot. They lost a lot, and the recruiting's been great, but they lost a ton, and Florida's going to be so much better. And South Carolina played within a couple scores, and they get Georgia at home. Just saying. On behalf of the SEC, I will take Nebraska and Clemson. Noah Iverson. Noah, I've seen you on here a little bit. Welcome to Mark Rogers TV. Big 12 is a joke. Longhorns Network killed that league. Nebraska couldn't run away, couldn't run any faster. And then he comes back and says, laugh all you want, but Northwestern makes more than Alabama from TV revenue. All right. So we've talked about that, and there's a guy on that has we've had on twice, Derek Helling. He does some nice work looking at big picture topics in college football. He doesn't analyze games or players or personnel or coaches. He looks at money, revenue, the business, the politics, the social issues, those things. And we discussed revenue a couple months ago. And there's no question that this has been going on forever, that the SEC and the Big Ten dominate college football where it counts. Not just on the field. The Big Ten doesn't dominate on the field. The SEC has. It's been a long time since the Big Ten dominated on the field, but it's a major player, of course. But off the field, revenue, power, money, eyeballs watching televisions, and I'm sure now watching phones and laptops, and butts in the seats ruled by the SEC and the Big Ten. There is a huge disparity between the SEC and the Big Ten and then everyone else in revenue. Now, I can't back up what Noah's claiming about Northwestern, meaning anybody in the Big Ten over anybody in the SEC in terms of revenue. I think Noah pointed out the other day that every team in the Big Ten made $51 million in revenue. Machine Unit, there isn't an easier league than the Big 12. Well, I would have definitely agreed with you a couple of years ago. I'm thinking that possibly the Pac 12 last year was the worst conference. This year, Washington, Stanford, USC, Utah. Compare those four with Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, West Virginia, Texas. Not one Big Ten fan got a check from that. Who gives about that? Titles are what fans want. Pigskin Pete jumping in there. The Big Ten hasn't dominated on the field since the 70s and the mid 90s. All right. Big Ten should add Colorado and Arizona and call it a day. Pac-12 network is a disaster. Pac-12 should call TCU and Houston. SEC Commission, ESPN both said without Texas A&M and Missouri, there is no SEC. Okay, so Noah, the Big Ten should not add Colorado and Arizona. The Pac-12 network is a disaster. Yes, it is. So the Longhorn Network has not served the Big 12 well. To have one program separate itself from the rest of the league is not good for the league. The Big Ten Network has done well, both in terms of revenue and, of course, it's connected to viewers. The SEC, though, has blown the rest of them away, and they did it the right way by hooking up with a major TV network that knows how to produce sports and knows how to produce television. So if you watch the SEC network and you watch the rest of them, and the rest of them do a fine job, at least I don't know much about the Pac-12 network except for it's struggling mightily. But the Big Ten Network does a nice job, but there's no comparison between the productions of the SEC and the Big Ten Network because the SEC Network is like watching ESPN. And that's one smart move that the SEC obviously made was that they made the decision, we are teaming up with ESPN, therefore we get ESPN quality. And that was probably part of the deal. We want, probably on both sides, that ESPN wanted to maintain its standards and the SEC wanted ESPN standards on its network. And so watching anything on the SEC is like watching ESPN. It's generally that good, especially from the from the standpoint of the game broadcasts and also the documentaries. All right. Machine Unit getting very detailed with LSU's final ranking at number 14. LSU was always top 6 if they're not. Okay. That means they've been effed up. George, you're telling us since 2011. Ohio was on probation. We must be talking about 2012. Paying recruits on Michigan and then money. All right, you guys are taking it away. So appreciate you jumping on the line to talk college football. I enjoy it each and every time. You guys are aware of what the content is on my channel. If you have any suggestions, whether that be content, what I've written down is you want Glenn Mason, you want a Vern Lundquist, you want Washington and Notre Dame coverage, and you want as many lists as I can make. I have all networks, and you're 100% correct, but the SEC does not have ownership. The Big Ten has ownership. True. Just wait until Disney smacks the SEC network. Okay. I can't comment on that. Again, you guys see the videos that we create here. We try to do the best we can in providing fair analysis across the board of college football. Of course, I can't get to everyone. Therefore, I concentrate on the big teams and the best teams and the elite teams and elite programs. But again, once I get to be able to do this full time, then you're going to see Oregon State and Kansas and Purdue. But for right now, it's a lot of Ohio State, Clemson, Alabama, LSU, Miami, etc. But I appreciate you guys jumping on the line and joining the live stream. Would it help you guys if I had a regular live stream schedule? It probably would. So I'll try to work on that, and probably will still just jump on when I feel like it, but I would like to provide a regular schedule. So what we've got set for this week for sure is that on Wednesday night, it's Ohio State, an all Ohio State blowout at 7 o'clock. Then at 8:30, we've got my man jumping on the line to talk Miami football, Mr. Holloway, who we have yet to discuss Miami football, but he's done a great job. He was highly recommended by Alonzo1219, Dwayne Holloway. And then that's at 8:30 Eastern time on Wednesday. Then at 10 o'clock, SEC talk, wide receivers, tight ends, and whatever you guys bring to the table on the live chat, we will discuss as well. Miami, LSU, all the time. Miami, LSU, LSU, Miami, Malik Rozier, Joe Burrow, DBU versus DBU. You guys are off the hook talking this all the time. And wow, when we get to that game, I will be doing instant analysis after LSU Miami for sure. Miami fans, if you weren't around for last year, I did instant analysis of the Canes after about 7 or 8 games, and it was great. And other games as well. Obviously, we cover all of college football. But yeah, I will. Hopefully, all of you will be on board for the live chat after the LSU Miami game, because it will probably go on all night. It'll go on all night for whatever team wins. All of you will be on, whether it's LSU or Miami, and the other ones will probably not want to hear it the rest of the way. So mark that one down. LSU Miami instant analysis after the game right here at Mark Rogers TV, and we will have a good time. I will probably just sit back and watch the live chat just fly by. LSU is DBU, Florida is DBU, Miami loses to Pitt. George, Ohio State, they jump in there as well. DBU, they produce about as well as anyone. Ohio State's always on some sort of probation, though. Are you talking, when you say Ohio, Alex, are you talking about OU? What else? I just can't leave this alone. You guys keep me going on this. Phil, and I still think Notre Dame should start a new super conference, steal some of the disgruntled best teams. Disgruntled. Most of those teams are in the Big 12. Save the date, September 2nd, for that Miami LSU instant analysis. Yes. Is that a Sunday game? I might have to take that off work, so I'm here and ready to go. That's a big weekend. Notre Dame, Michigan, Florida State, Virginia Tech. Should be a good weekend. And there's an under the radar conference game starting on Thursday night. I think it's a Big Ten Network game. Purdue, Northwestern. Can't wait for that game. That will be my first game that I really lock into, that Thursday night game. All right, everyone. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Certainly subscribe if you haven't, and let your college football fans out there that you know, that you're acquainted with on Facebook or Twitter or wherever else, know that I'm around producing college football content like nobody else each and every day. Like and comment. That helps the channel out as well. And certainly, again, the suggestions, get them in. Glenn Mason, Vern Lundquist, lists, Washington, and Notre Dame coverage. That's what I've got right here. And I will go after some of the best people that I can find. Mark, did you know referee Terry Porter from the 2002 Natty game? Do I know him personally? No, I have never met the man. Panther Pro 22 is going to the Bama Louisville game. George is a lightweight, can only make it 3 more hours. All right, boys, I'm going to shut it down. Again, suggestions on content. And anybody you want to see on here, believe me, I will go after them. And some of the questions you guys ask make me think that we're gonna have a Mark Rogers TV big forum where we're going to discuss the channel, discuss my experience and where I've been and what I've done. And I will leave myself open to any questions about the channel and what I've done and my experience and that sort of thing. And now is probably the time to do that before football gets real serious. Ricky's going to every Iowa home game. And by the looks of Iowa's schedule, they look like they're staying home the entire season. Somehow somebody doesn't seem like the biggest game of the week one. Michigan Notre Dame content. So Machine Unit, I don't know how long you've been with me because this is the first time I've seen your comments. We talk to Steve Deace, Michigan podcast on a regular basis. So I know that the videos can get lost in the channel stream. And if you just click on the videos or look at the front page, you just see a zillion videos and it's difficult to find. Use your search engine and just type in Michigan Wolverines or Michigan, and you will see Machine Unit. You will see all the Michigan videos that I posted in the last several months, which has been a ton with Steve Deace, Michigan podcast. Isaiah Hull from, I don't want to screw this up, I think he's a Rivals guy, not 247, Rivals guy. Had him on last week or the week before, and we'll have plenty of Michigan talk coming up as well. Yeah, it gets real serious in about 40 days because we go to the conference media days. More top 10 lists. Top 10. And you guys probably won't get to it this summer, and most of the leagues probably won't let me in with credentials because I don't cover a particular team. Because the last time I went after SEC Media Day credentials, even though they knew me from going there 6 or 7 straight years back around 2000, they didn't quite allow it because they said, Mark, you don't cover the SEC. You're not here at the games. But I will be going to the American Conference Media Days. And in future years, if this gets to the place where I need it to be, next year, Maybe I'll be circling the country around media days, going to LA for the Pac-12 and Chicago for the Big Ten and Alabama for the SEC and wherever the Big 12 hosts theirs, Dallas or Kansas City, Charlotte for the ACC. We'll do that at some point, but we'll be sitting home watching and surveying the media days this year. Do you think he will ever get to Big Ten Media Day credentials? I sure hope so. NCIS Fanatic 21. Top 10 teams on a current losing streak. What do we mean, against a particular team like LSU against Bama? Is that what we're talking about? Top 10 on a losing streak? So that's interesting. So what comes to mind among good teams would be LSU losing to Bama 7 straight times. Clemson has beaten South Carolina 4 straight, but I'm sure there are some other ones. Of course, Florida over Kentucky 31 straight. Yikes. That's got to end sometime soon, right? Even at 4-7, Florida kept that streak alive against a Kentucky team that was decent last year. NCIS Fanatic 21. Yeah, I will take you guys. I'm going to strike up a live chat and I'm going to discuss my career just to fill you in on what I've done and where I've been. It's nothing that impressive, believe me. And the viewership will probably go from about 50 down to about 4 at the end. But for you, NCIS Fanatic 21, we'll get that done. Just give us 8 more hours to sort this out. 51-16 Bama. That would be over Louisville, I would guess. And Pigskin Pete will have you on soon. Just send me an email, Pigskin Pete, of when you'd like to be on. That would either be Sunday, meaning tomorrow, Monday afternoon, Friday afternoon would be good, maybe Thursday night. Clemson beat Auburn 4 straight, 2, and Ohio State 3 straight. So we're talking about, when you talk about winning consecutive games, I think about conference games because, yeah, Clemson's beaten Ohio State 3 straight. And the third one, you've got to go back to 1978. Is that really winning consecutive games? It is, in a sense, but I think of teams that play every year in a conference, and Florida defeating Kentucky 31 straight times. I would start out by looking at the best teams in every conference and looking at the worst teams, and that's typically where you find the losing streaks. Ohio State kills Indiana every year. The last time they lost to Indiana was 1988. They obviously have whipped up on Maryland and Rutgers every time ever since they joined the Big Ten, and Nebraska. Although they lost to Nebraska in 2011, the first Nebraska year in the Big Ten. Tim Lee, Clemson is effing good versus Ohio State. So the one game was the blowout. The Orange Bowl game in 2013 was a really good game. Auburn was 4 straight in the last 5 years. Iowa has never lost to Alabama because we have never played Alabama. All right. Again, Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. And this is what we do. And you guys make it what it is, more so than me. So I appreciate it. And whether you root for Michigan or LSU or Miami or Ohio State or Clemson or whoever, thanks so much for joining us right here at Mark Rogers TV. I will do a live stream at some time tomorrow. I don't know what time, probably sometime mid to late afternoon. And so until then, you guys continue to argue who's going to win, LSU, Miami, and maybe I'll take a poll and have you guys jump in. That's what YouTube needs to include here. They should add a poll where I can take a poll and you guys can vote. And I would guess it's going to be Miami slightly with about like a 55-45 advantage. But these LSU viewers, you guys are coming on strong. All right. Until next time, we appreciate it. Thanks for the support. Like, comment, and subscribe. We will see you soon. That would be on Sunday, right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football.